Welcome to Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the fifth dimension.
Welcome to another podcast episode of Merkaba Chakras. I'm your host, Vaughn Galt, and today we talk to author and medium Chris Lippincott. Now, Chris spent his whole life communicating with loved ones in the spirit realms and helps people heal with the messages that he gets from them. Now, he is teaching people worldwide how to directly communicate with your deceased loved ones now. So, with that, Chris, welcome to Merkaba Chakras.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Love your book. I love the message. And I think, especially at this time, there is less taboo and fear about communicating with deceased loved ones. A lot of people have embraced that you can be religious and you can be spiritual and still communicate with deceased loved ones in a lot of different ways. And so I think it's so appropriate that everybody who is interested in learning this skill that you have and that you are teaching learn to harness that for themselves so that it comes in handy if they do need to speak to a loved one about something.
Yeah,
So,
it's also it's without a doubt it's also about just this entire spiritual awakening that's going on the planet and the entire desire to kind of raise the love, raise the energy, raise the spiritual awareness.
yeah. Yeah. Well, before we get into your work and kind of where it plays in the leveling up of consciousness here on Spaceship Earth, can you tell us your story for how you even got into it? Because this is not a normal job that kids grow up to want to be.
No, this is not one of those things that you sign on a dotted line and say, "I'd like to be a medium, please."
Yeah.
No,
This is not a career fair type of,
no, no, that was definitely not there. I guess if I back all the way up to the time I was probably around 5 or 6 or so, that would probably be when it all began for me. And, like most kids, I was playing with my, imaginary friends, and I was an only child, so I was very imaginative. I had lots of imaginary friends. But the thing that I didn't really realize at the time was that those imaginary friends were a little bit different because they were talking back to me and we were having full conversations back and forth. And so all these people I'm talking to, and they're all talking back to me and talking about things that a child would normally be talking about. I was like, okay, this is fun. I've got a great imagination. But also, when I went to bed at night, sometimes I'd feel like a hand on my back, which of course just scared the daylights out of me. Or I'd hear voices in my room, and being an only child, and my parents at the other end of the house, I knew it wasn't anybody else.
And this is when you were 6?
Yeah, I was like 5 or 6, and so I'm just thinking it's monsters under the bed, right? I'm just thinking, they're coming to drag me to their lair. So I'm just getting completely panicked, totally stricken. And I'm just begging them to leave. And, there are times where I would feel this effervescent champagne blanket wrapping around me, just like tingles all over the place. But I didn't know what it was. I was just scared. And as I grew older, maybe 9ish, 10, and I kept not only trying to suppress it because I was scared, but also because I was growing more logical, more material, more this is the way the world works kind of thing. I basically suppressed it for 20, 30 years, whatever. And I kept on saying, no, there's this can't be right. And it was like I was always feeling things around me, but I didn't know what it was. I thought I was just a grown man with like this paranoid, delusion of like somebody following me. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was a grown man scared of the dark. Like for some reason, the boogeyman's going to come out, 20, 30-year-olds still thinking I'm going to be attacked by the boogeyman. Come on.
Let me ask you something about that really quick. So, because you said a lot of things and I want to kind of break it up to kind of understand, because there's a lot of people that have gone through what you've gone through. So when you were little and you were starting to see these different spirits that you would call, your friends, and they would communicate to you, did you remember any of the things that they would communicate to you, anything they said or images? So what
Yeah.
was the communication? Do you have any recall of what kind of communication was given to you?
No, it was more just kind of back and forth and awareness. They were all around me, and awareness. There was this feeling of incredible comfort, and especially when the sun was up, I wasn't afraid of anything. When the sun went down, that was a whole other story. But I know that when I was in contact with my imaginary playmates, in quotes, that there was definitely that feeling of comfort, security, the feeling that everything's okay. And I don't remember the exact words or phrases or concepts that they were trying to get across, other than I knew they were there and I was in contact with them. So it was kind of a...
Okay. So you kind of had a feeling that that you were being watched, that there was others around you, other beings, but they weren't embodied, but you didn't get any clear messages from them when you were a child.
Not then, no. I
Did
didn't
you
know what
ever
it
get
was.
any kind of like images from them? Like, like a thought or image in your head of what one would look like?
No, I mean, I could sense them. I could feel them. There are times where to me, they look just like other regular kids. So in my mind, I was more in contact with images of what seemed to be like other kids. So it was like the difference between an imaginary child and a spirit child was almost meaningless to me. I could barely tell the difference. I don't think I knew the difference. I think
Well,
that my mind was just like, there is no difference, because I was so
right,
focused on my creative side.
right. So when you're looking at, like, say when you were a kid, when you're looking at, because there are people who, I mean, I had your experience growing up, and I knew that there was spirits hanging around watching and so forth, and I would scare my parents sometimes, going, I think there's somebody in the closet, and my dad would go in there trying to see if there was an intruder, and it wasn't an intruder. And so I just slept with a nightlight on, or put the covers completely over it,
Oh yeah.
and I
Oh yeah.
I would tuck. Yeah, I'm not sure if you did this, but I
Oh,
would
I did
tuck.
exactly the same
Did you
thing.
do the same thing? Oh,
Yeah. Sheets are over me. I'd be singing to myself, so I couldn't hear anything else.
Yeah. I would put soft kind of like classic music at night, and I would just kind of have it play really, really quietly, so there's always some white noise at night, so that I couldn't, because if it was
Oh,
totally quiet.
I had a sound machine. Yeah. I had a
Yeah,
sound machine.
I did
Yeah.
the same
Right.
thing too. I did the same thing too. And then I don't know if you did this, but um and I'm just relating this because to let people understand what it's like being one of these people, and what it's like to have a kid that is one of these people with these skills, so they understand what goes on in the mind. But I'm not sure if you did this, but I would have the blankets completely tucked all the way around my
Yep.
bed. I
Yep.
had a
Oh yeah.
twin bed, and I had
Yep.
a California king blanket tucked all the way around. So
Yep.
then I would just get in there and then just pull it up over my head, and then I
Totally.
had the kind of the white noise music with
Yeah,
the
exactly.
radio.
I had to feel like I was strapped in, as if I could be turned upside down, and you couldn't shake me out. I had to be so
Yeah,
tight so that
I was
nothing
like,
could get in.
yeah, I was like, there's nothing going to come into the bed.
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
Okay, so a lot of them do that. So parents out there, if you're seeing this and you're seeing that your kid's feeling a little paranoid or something, but if you see these things where they're tucking all the blankets underneath, they're asking for a little white noise or a little radio turn on a little bit at night, so that it's not completely deafening silence, or even a little night light is always nice. I
Yeah.
ask for a little night light, and a little night light will be fine, so I can at least see the lights. But and that was how I was able to finally go to sleep. But I still always had that feeling that I was being watched.
Hmm.
But however, I never really saw them. As I got older, I wanted to see them, couldn't see them. But I did slowly start, I'm not sure if you got this. I did slowly, like if I was walking by, I remember on the way home from school in like first grade, I was walking by an abandoned house, and all the kids would cross the street and walk across the street, not walk next to the sidewalk of this abandoned house because it was always creepy. But I would walk with my friends to school and I would look over and I would see the spirit that is in there. And it was basically somebody had died in that house, but their spirit is still in that house. It kind of gives me little chills. But I would walk through different places and I would get an eerie feeling, and then I would immediately get an image in my mind about that spirit. And oftentimes it was just a lot of sadness. They just lived a very sad life, and they just could not go to the light because they were afraid of judgment. They were afraid of letting go of the people that they didn't have reconciliation, or they had some worries for. So a lot of that kind of stuff was what I got. And so I eventually learned, and I'm not sure, because you have to cope at some point. I eventually learned to just accept and respect, and I just learned that to kind of say to them, because most people don't see them or hear them or feel them. But sometimes I would feel, hear, and see them, and I would talk to them and say, "Hey, I see you there. I know I'm trying to get some sleep. Can you just leave?"
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, "Oh my God." I scared the heck out of them.
Yeah.
But
It was that, yeah, very, very much so. It's like I can even remember as a young child just like talking to them and begging them to leave. I'm like,
what
just
did they say?
go.
What did they say?
Nothing. It was rather funny. Well, looking back on it, it was rather funny. I'm begging them to leave as a young child, just shivering and quivering and fear and I don't, and all this. And so eventually they respected my wishes. They left. They never came back. They never bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I had this like forlorn, like, okay, well, where'd you all go?
But they listened to you.
Exactly.
They finally listened to you because they said, so let me ask you this. So, okay, so that was your childhood growing up, which I totally understand. And we gave a very, very good description of what it was like to be one of these children. If you have one of these children, what kind of like symptoms that you will see in their behavior. But then as you get older, you still have to do the same things everybody. You still have to get up, brush your teeth, go to bed. You still have to go to school, do your homework. You still have life.
Yeah.
Okay, you still have your human life to participate in. You just happen to have an extrasensory ability that other kids don't have. So how do you do your childhood with this extrasensory ability? It's, can you give people some idea about that?
Yeah, for me, I had suppressed it so much that I tried to ignore everything because, again, I was just so scared out of my mind. I just kept on suppressing. But I always had this feeling. And so whenever there was anything around me or anyone around me, I could feel them, and I'd just go, what is the problem? So I always thought it was me. I always thought I was the one with the problem. I always thought I was the one who was afraid of the dark or afraid of the feeling, or I was paranoid. I always thought I was paranoid because I was feeling all these energies and I knew there was somebody around me, but I couldn't see them. For the life of me, I could feel them. I knew they were there, but I didn't know what it was. Still. And
did you ever talk to your parents about it? Like, because many kids go to their parents and they say, and what did your parents tell you? Because I'll tell you what my parents told me.
Oh, that's another story.
We want to hear this because we can understand. Because if you're teaching people this and they're learning this, they're going to get a crash course in what you and I went through as in our whole life. We didn't get the crash course. So they need to know this. So when you told your parents, what did they say?
Well, my parents were very materialistic, very agnostic, very traditional minded. They weren't religious. They were just, matter of fact, material minded. Like, so when I tried to begin to tell them, there's somebody in my closet, or there's somebody in my room, or there's something, or I can remember, we had this big converted, we had this big living room that used to be a converted barn. So it was like this big empty room. And we had all these old oil paintings of, like the paintings that looked like they might have been out of like a haunted house, but
Right.
who knows who they were. The kind that would like be painted so the pupils are staring at you, and no matter where you went, they'd follow you. As a kid, I was just like,
that's what makes it a good horror movie.
oh yeah. So I'd see that, and then I'd feel the energy around me, thinking it was the painting. And I would just scream and then run as fast as I possibly could into another room where my parents were sitting watching TV, and I'd jump into their arms, quivering, and they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, they're there. And they're like, who's there? And then I tried to explain to them, and they're just like, so patronizing. They're there. It's okay. There's nobody there. I'm like, what do you mean there's nobody there? Of course there's somebody there. And they just tell me no.
So you were stuck to deal with it on your own, basically.
Totally. And I was just like, all right, well, it was all me.
I have a different reaction. So I told my mother and father early on, and my father's is not really, my parents are Buddhist, and we understand that there's different realms and existences and so forth. But they don't have that experience, and so they're like, well, just try to ignore them, tell them to go away, that kind of push away kind of stuff. And that's what I would typically do, because they didn't have any framework for how to handle that. And so that's what I ended up doing, is because I never got any messages or communication. I just kind of got a feeling of kind of what their story was, and oftentimes it was sadness. And so I over time growing up would just basically did the push away, like, oh, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but you're not alive anymore, so you have to go to the other side. You have to go to the light. There's nothing for you. And I just did that pushing away, and it said, there's nothing for you here. You have to let go. You have to forgive. There's nothing for it. No one's going to judge you. I just kept on the pushing away. Go to the light, go to the light. And I got really, really good at it. That I did come across some beings that were very, very low frequency, who, the equivalent of like people that you just do not want to ever get to know in life. And in spirit, they still suck too.
Yeah.
And I came across some of those, and I was like, oh, well, lucky for you, you're in my presence. So here's the deal. You're going to go into the light. One, you're going to leave me alone, because I'm not going to do anything for you. I made it very clear. I'm not going to do I'm not the ghost whisperer. This isn't no movie. Okay. I'm not going to do anything for you. You're going to go into the light. You're going to say your piece to whoever you want to say your piece to, and then you're going to go into the light. And I would just kind of give them a Dharma talk. And for the most part, that's what I typically did. But, and usually this runs in families. Like my mother and a lot of the women in my family have a little bit of a sixth sense where they can kind of pick up spirit, but not to the level of where I was picking up spirit communication. And a lot of it was just basically what I've come across. I'm not sure if you've come across this. A lot of it is basically they're just afraid to cross over because they're afraid to let go.
Oh yeah. A lot of times I'll encounter people that stay behind because they're actually worried about the people that are still here. Like, say, for example, like a mother who has children still here. They're worried sick about what's going to happen to their children now that I'm not here. Who's going to take care of them? Or it's something to that effect, where who's going to take care of the bills and the mortgage of the house? A man dies, that kind of stuff. So it's just like, it's this worried. They're worried sick about what are they going to do now that I'm not here. I got to watch over these people, so I'm going to stay here. Or in other cases, it's maybe they did something and they feel like they've got to kind of repeat it over and over again to kind of to make it right, or they feel like they want to make amends, or they feel like they got to do it right, or they feel like it's still their place. In many cases, you'll see people who are still in, I won't call them the physical, but they're in between the physical and the non-physical, where they're still in, let's say, a house. People are wondering, why are they in the house? And why do they get angry at us? Well, they get angry just because they don't realize, they've passed on. And so they're wondering, why are you in my house? this is still my house. Well, guess what? No, it's not your house.
Yeah. So let me ask you something about that. So I understand kind of like your pathway growing up. You became an adult, and then at some point you decide to go back and revisit the sixth sense, or how did it come back into fruition for you?
Well, let's see. Over the course of my 20, 30 year gap, I had been always in the back of my head, still had this voracious appetite and interest, but I didn't know why. And it was very much that spirit was clear, looking back on it again, 2020 hindsight, spirit was basically putting breadcrumbs in front of me, because what they did was they were constantly putting these incredibly interesting titles of books of all the different subjects I could possibly read. So over the course of 20, 30 years, I read, I don't know how many hundreds of books on near-death experiences, on mediumship, on quantum science, I mean, everything under the sun, afterlife, automatic writings. I mean, it was like hundreds and hundreds of books, and I was just like, I couldn't be satisfied. I was reading everything.
Yeah.
And eventually I started just understanding more and more and more of it. And I was like, okay, so that's what that means. So it's almost like I was having a self-education for all those, 2 or 3 decades that I missed. I kind of caught up.
Yeah.
But what was rather amusing, if you will, is during that time frame, I was, intensely in finance. I was, doing sell-side research, brokerage. So I was like so stressed out and just, ready to flip out. And I'm knowing, okay, well, I gotta find a way to calm down. So somehow I stumbled upon meditation. I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I can deal with it. I started doing these guided meditations, 10 to 15 minutes every day, thinking, well, this is nice and calming. And I would do it before I went to work. I'm like, oh, I'm nice and calm. This is good. But I didn't quite realize what I was getting myself into, because I just did it for 12 months or so. I'm like, okay, this is great. I'll just keep on doing it. But after the end of 12 months, one weekend I'm in my man cave. All guys have to have a man cave, right? Yeah. So I'm in my man cave on a Saturday morning doing my meditation, and I'm trying to do a long one, maybe a 30-minute meditation. I'm really getting into it. And all of a sudden, it's like I've got this out-of-body experience. I feel like I'm transported into some ethereal place where all I can see are, I guess I look back on it, it's probably be like the equivalent of clouds, but they weren't clouds. And I remember seeing 2 spirit beings on my left front and 2 others on my right front that were a little bit taller. The one all the way to the right-hand side was the tallest, and that was the one who was really kind of interacting with me. And I remember specifically that one at one point, like shot a really intense beam of energy straight through my chest and out through my back. And when that happened, I suddenly realized, well, I guess I'm not asleep, huh? Because I could feel the thing.
Yeah.
I could feel this intense energy, and I'm just going along for the ride, going, "This is amazing. What's happening? Who are these people?" I for some reason I recognized them, but I couldn't place my finger on them. I'm like, I know who you are, but I don't know who you are. So it was kind of confusing.
Right.
But the more it went on, then I'm at this place that kind of, I guess I would equate to something like outer space or the universe or some place where it was just far out there. And I remember feeling that it was some place that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I got this intense feeling of overwhelming love, where the word love just doesn't even match it, doesn't even begin to even
Did
describe
you sense
it.
anybody else there? Just your presence?
When I was there, it was just me. And I knew there was something bigger around me. And I knew I was connected to whatever was there. And I was connected to this feeling of love that stretched, from the beginning to the end. There was no end, and there was no beginning. It was everywhere. And I was part of it. And it was like, there was no individual aspect.
Yep.
It was all singularity. It was all combined. And it was so intense. And then eventually I came back and I just was in my chair, just like in a daze for about 15 minutes trying to figure out what had happened. And as soon as I kind of came to, if you will, I ran to my desk and started scribbling as fast as I possibly can. Every single thing.
Try to remember everything.
Yeah, so I remembered everything. I'm like, what just happened? Oh my God, I got to write this down.
What did you remember in that moment where you connected to consciousness? Because and just for everybody else, they have proven this in science and meditation research. That and they did this with a lot of monks and nuns where they would measure the brainwaves, because that's how we know how to measure right now is the brainwaves. We're working on heart waves, but anyways. You get to a high frequency, and the highest frequency that science is able to measure in brain research is gamma brainwaves. But when your brainwaves hit gamma, every person who does deep meditation who hits that brainwaves says the same thing. There is no more identity. They completely lost their identity, and now they are one with everything. And and that is the energy of energy healing. So if you want to do energy healing and you want to heal something, that is the energy. That's the crystalline consciousness, the Christ light of source. That is the breaking point in which you connect to source and consciousness. And they've already proven this in meditation and brain research. So what you just described is that part of our consciousness where everybody is able to access. Now, what you did with it was you got all this information. Were you able to take some information back with you after you came back down to your Chris Lippincott identity?
Well, what wound up happening is essentially that reopened the portal to my 6-year-old self. Because as soon as that happened, within a few days, I began experiencing that champagne-like feeling of the bubble going around me. I could really sense everybody around me all of a sudden. I knew where they were, and I could start to hear voices. I would feel the chills again. Soon I was like in communication with people. Family members began to pop in my dreams all the time.
What's that like?
It was actually really cool because normally with a dream, we can't really remember. It's kind of fuzzy, and it's kind of like, well, it could be this, could be that, and maybe
I remember them.
Yeah, but normally you're just kind of like, well, whatever. It was a dream. But these were vivid dreams, and that's the typical dream visitation of the spirit. When the spirit comes in and visits you, it's something that will last the rest of your life. You will never forget that. It's a memory that you will always have. It's vivid to the point where you can smell things, taste things, see things, remember the conversation in detail. Places that you couldn't possibly have done in a regular dream. And that just kept on happening over and over and over again. And the big one was my father, where it was just, I remember, being in my 6-year-old house, and it was a point where I'm like, wait a second, I know I'm an adult, but I'm walking around my 6-year-old house. How is this possible? And I remember hearing my wife in the next room, in the kitchen. I'm like, that's odd. Why is my wife in my 6-year-old house? That still doesn't make any sense. And I walked over to the kitchen, and I looked at the table on the far end of the kitchen, and I see my father sitting at one end of the table, talking to my wife at the other end of the table. And I vividly remember going, just breathing in, and I remember my lips physically going like this. And I remember turning to my wife, questioning without words, but telepathically going, is this real? And I remember seeing her nod. So like he brought her in the dream to prove that it was real. And then we started having a communication with each other. And then he's like, apologizing that he wasn't a good enough father. And the whole conversation went on. And there I am in the dream, grabbing him, bawling, saying, I love you. I was a bad teenager, blah, blah, blah. It was, a made for TV special.
Yeah. And that's and that happens. So now that was in the lucid dream, in which, and everybody can get to the point where they go into a lucid dream and they can have communication, or they could do this in meditation, and they can also do it in this hypnosis. But any aspect that will get you into that high brainwave where you can kind of break the veil and communicate with anybody within consciousness, like your father or whatnot. But what does it feel like to get messages like when you're awake, in your waking state, when you're trying to do mediumship for somebody, for yourself or somebody else? What does that feel like?
That's very different. When I connect to spirit, it becomes a very, what's a good phrase for it? Light, ethereal connection where words, feelings, phrases, images, sounds are dropping into my awareness. So I'll become aware of images. I'll hear sounds, names, music. Sometimes, quite often, songs are significant. Spirit will use whatever is required to have a I understand that kind of thing, because it's basically spirit charades.
Right.
What are they going to use to get that message across, get that idea, the concept they're trying to relay? And so I'll see, I'm a very visual person, so I'll see images and movies, and I'll feel their personalities, and sometimes I'll begin to act like them. They'll overshadow me. So my arms will move the way their arms moved, or my face will contort in the way their face will contort.
Almost kind of like you're channeling their presence, or you're being a conduit. So. Almost like you're being a conduit for their presence to communicate through you. Okay.
Yeah, and there have been times when I've gone into a full trance without meaning to, and I'll channel their loved one, and they'll be talking back and forth. And I'm like, wow, this is great, because I'm kind of stepping back. I'm sort of aware of what's going on, but I'm that's kind of like a bystander. I'm like a third person going, "Oh, that looks really interesting. Oh, really? Oh,
yeah." So when you're in that state where you're communicating on behalf of, let's say, somebody to the deceased loved one, you have gotten to the point where you're able to kind of change your consciousness and allow that presence to come in and communicate through you as a conduit. Is that a correct way of saying it?
Yeah, I would say that it's a mix. It depends on how deep I go. Sometimes it's just very much like a daydream, where I'm kind of there, my mind is kind of off somewhere, my body's still here, and I'm just sort of it's a light altered state, where I'm just allowing my mind to basically kind of go back and forth between what's getting dumped into my head. Other times I get into a deeper trance where I will have spirit control my mind. I allow them to control my mind, and they speak through me using their words and everything they're doing. So it depends on how deep the state goes. Sometimes it's just a really light alter, because all mediumship is typically a light altered state. Although sometimes you can kind of slip into a deeper trance where you actually are that person.
Right. So I want to relate this to people who may be freaking out, like, oh my God, it's possession. Actually, you can do this not even with mediumship and channeling. You could do this with meditation and hypnosis. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to get into that high brainwave frequency where you can bridge the veil and you can communicate with anybody within consciousness. So in my channel, Merkaba Chakras, is a playlist for hypnosis that I've done with clients all over the world. And one of the aspects is, when we get into those high gamma brainwave frequencies, is we talk to source itself, and we also talk to the deceased loved ones. and you can actually hear the change in the inflection, the tone, the information comes through. I've had clients who wanted to know where something is missing in the house, and nobody in the family knows where it is, but the deceased loved one that they brought forth, using their body as a conduit, tells them where it is. And when they come out of the session, they're like, I know where to go find that. And then they go and find that. I've actually had a client who tried to find the dead body, the missing body of his best friend who died in or gone missing in the woods. And that being came forward and told the exact location where to find it. And that's where they're searching. So just for those people out there who's like, woo, it's spirits and deceased loved ones coming in through trance and talking to you, that sounds like possession and demon stuff. You could do it in other ways, and they've done this with meditation research. You could do it through meditation, hypnosis, channeling, mediumship. It's just different ways in which to get to that state of consciousness where you could talk to anybody within source.
Also, let me add one thing while you're on that topic. Also, the reason spirit comes through, first and foremost, is all about love and their transformative love and their healing. The reason they want to come through to their loved ones in physical is to give them their love, express their love, to heal them through the mediumship experience. The entire purpose of spirit coming through is only for love and healing. So for all those people who tend to think, oh, this goes against biblical teachings, God said, avoid mediums or whatever the sayings are, couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, Christ was a medium.
Yeah.
And he was one of the best. And it's the concept that it's evil or devil worship or something is farther from the truth, because it's actually something that we're trying to do to serve spirit so that spirit can bring through their love and healing to those in need.
Right.
So we're serving a need.
Right. And just for those as well, in Buddhism, because this is a Buddhism podcast, in Buddhism, as you raise your frequency in your awakening and ascension process into higher levels of consciousness, you automatically open yourself up to your natural innate six senses, in which can be many, not just one or two or five. It can be many. It's just a new state of consciousness. And in Buddhism, it's very common to train your six senses so that you can cope with them, live with them, and use them appropriately. So there's a whole guidance system when it comes to awakening, ascension, and your six senses, because they're all natural. It's a natural aspect.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, Buddhism's been around for so long, and they're the ones that have taught everybody else how to do it. I mean, they taught Christ, they taught Jesus how to do it.
Yeah, Yeshua ben Yosef. Yeah, went through the schools, and we taught him since he was a kid. A lot of the energy healing, metaphysics, consciousness, etc. But I just wanted to preface that because for some people, they are still very much indoctrinated to the fear that your sixth senses is a bad thing. But it is a natural thing as you raise your level of consciousness through your awakening and ascension process. So it's not to be scared of. It's like a growth spurt. And like if you shoot up a foot in the summer, you're going to be a little clumsy and a little bit kind of dangerous to everybody else, because you're kind of like a big kid in a China store. But you're going to have to learn some new etiquette, and you're going to have to learn your new ability appropriately. So with that, let me ask you this. So, obviously you were talking about images and words, and, you have some kind of feeling. What about synchronicity? I mean, now that you're opening yourself up to your deceased loved ones who may communicate in form of some kind of object or symbol or song that you recognize as them, or even like if you open yourself up to your angels or your spirit guides who are helping you have the best experience that you plan for yourself in this life, how do people work with the concept of synchronicity on their everyday? Because you're not going to automatically get messages and hear a voice or see an image all the time.
Yeah, that's a good question. Synchronicity is the point at which you've got two events or basically happening either in line or for a reason that can't be obviously explained. And a lot of people call it coincidence, but the famous phrase is there is no such thing as coincidence. All synchronicity has a purpose. It has been designed and it is intentionally created, to the point where synchronicities are done to catch our attention. They're done so that we will pay attention because it's something that doesn't happen all the time. Whether that synchronicity happens to be repeating numbers, synchronicity happens to be, seeing a white flower where no flower should be growing, or a white feather that is impossible to exist in that place. These are synchronicities that may happen all the time, and until you begin to to pay attention to it, it's going to keep on happening. And quite often people will experience synchronicities and they'll kind of poo-poo them and just kind of ignore them, but then they'll start to realize that they keep on happening over and over and over again, different types, but they start noticing that there are all these different types of synchronicities always happening, and eventually it's like somebody finally beating them over the head saying, "Wake up."
So can you give people an example on how to, like as in Buddhism, 1, we are energy, and then 2, we create our reality based on our decisions and our actions about it. And that directs us to the next best reality that matches our frequency. And there are parallel realities all the time. And that just goes into advanced Buddhism. But in simplistic terms, you are living one reality at a time, one moment at a time. How can people use synchronicity as a message from the deceased loved ones to make the highest decisions for themselves? So can you give us some example of kind of like something that happened in your life where you followed certain synchronicities and it led you towards a path and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
There was a time where just at work, I'd leave work, and for some reason I was becoming aware of energy around me, and I started to think, well, gee, there's something going on here. I should probably pay attention to it, but I'm not sure what it is. And I just basically shouted, or didn't shout, but I spoke to the sky thinking, okay, sky, whatever's up there, powers that be, because I didn't know what it was. I kind of say, powers that be, if you're out there, and can you give me a sign to let me know what I'm, that you're real, that you're with me? And I was expecting it to happen immediately. Of course, it didn't happen immediately. So I just go on my merry way, ignoring everything else. And next thing I know, I start seeing all these really bizarre things happening that were catching my attention. For example, like these pure white feathers that were right in front of me. I'm like, but wait, that's physically impossible. There's no way a bird could humanly be in here, possibly be in here. There's no way a bird could be in here.
Yeah.
And then I'd see all these other things, and I was that idiot who spirit was kind of banging on the head saying, wake up, we are here. We're answering your call. You just asked us to answer your call. We are here. Pay attention to us. So I was the slow one. And so eventually I'm like, oh, okay. I guess there is something here. I better follow this.
Right.
And so eventually I started to not only pay attention and really understand that all the voices and the names, everything is like starting to wake up. I've got to do something with it. And it was bigger than me, and it was meant for everybody else. It was meant for the world. And I started to get this intense feeling that whatever I was experiencing was love and was meant to be expressed for the world. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just too big for me. What do I do with it?
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I've got to go study it. Where do you study it? You go study it at places that teach you mediumship and teach you about mediumship and about spirit. So I started going to classes, started, going to practice circles, wherever a beginner medium,
wherever you can find something. Yeah.
Wherever you can find it. And so I just was voraciously, going that direction. And I was just like, I was like a newbie going, teach me.
Right. So your journey is very it's very fascinating in that you kind of like as a child you naturally had an innate sixth sense that you brought with you into this incarnation. You kind of shunned it away in order to have your childhood, and then through synchronicity and reading all the books and materials that would come through, you reawaken this sixth sense and you start really going into it and going, okay, there is something here. But that's the first thing is people when they come into their sixth sense in this process, and then they have their sixth sense and they're working on this sixth sense. Now it's like, well, what do I do with it? What do I do with it? Because I gotta do something with all this information and this abilities, and whatever it is. And just so you guys know, Merkaba Chakras is a library. All the videos is a library of different things, sixth senses that you can learn, and things that you can learn, and then lots of courses and so forth to learn that, so that you can learn to do something with it, whether it's for yourself or for others. So what are the most, so now that you're doing something with it, what are the most profound cases that you've worked on or that you have taught to your students that they have done? I mean, what are some of the head scratchers like, whoa?
One of the most amazing readings I remember doing was actually fairly recently. There were several, but there was one that sticks in my head because I remember connecting with this man who was coming through, and he was giving me all this information and incredible detail, and I'm just giving everything. And I'm going on for, a good 10, 15 minutes. And these two women, the mother and the aunt, I believe, just couldn't take it. They're looking at each other, just scratching their head. And I know that whatever I was getting was great detail. I know the man was there, and I know everything was perfect. I'm getting frustrated going, well, you got to give me something.
Yeah, you're not getting any kind of feedback from the ladies, huh?
No, I'm just getting, no, we don't understand it. No, we don't, I'm just going, and they were getting kind of frustrated too, because one of them looked at their watch. I'm like, oh, here we go. This is we're going downhill. So about halfway through the reading, as this man's going on, giving me all this great detail and great information, all of a sudden in my mind's eye, I see the man kind of standing slightly off to my right corner in my mind's eye. And just beyond him in my mind's eye, I see this woman march up to him like this, and take the back of her hand and swat him away. And as she swats him away, she yells at the top of her lungs, "Get away, Jimmy!" And I just cackle in laughter. And I relay it exactly as I described it, exactly as I saw it. And as I did that, both women shrieked at the top of their lungs, "Oh my God!" Because all of a sudden that's like broke open the dam, because they understood, they knew all of a sudden who Jimmy was. They knew the woman because of her attitude and her anger and her aggression. They immediately knew that was the mother and the estranged brother. And it was just like everything just popped right open right then. And at that point, both women are just absolutely emotional, and then it's just all the love that started coming in, and the mother, in spirit was embracing the daughter, caressing the back of her hair, and this, I was practically in tears at that point. And you could just feel this woman who was so brokenhearted because her mother had passed. You could just sort of feel her heart starting to become whole again. And that was one that really just was astounding. And there have been countless others where, one, in fact, I just did this afternoon, where I brought through her parents, wonderful people, but they were really the people who essentially opened up the portal for the real person that she wanted to connect with. I didn't know who she wanted to connect. Yeah, who eventually turned out. It turned out to be the love of her life.
Oh.
But I didn't know who this person was. They're doing, they're giving us all the information. So the vast majority of the reading was her parents. Beautiful reading, beautiful, emotional, what have you. Quite accurate. And then there's this man who I'm getting like spotty information. I'm like, oh gosh, I have to really struggle to figure out who this person is. But that was part of it, because that's actually how astronomers, when they're looking for a black hole, they don't look for the black hole itself. They look for a ring where there's a lack of light around it. It's oftentimes the same thing with spirit. If in the physical they had problems speaking, or they had problems interacting with people, they won't give you direct information. They'll give you that same feeling, the feeling that nothing's coming through, that everything's spotty, that they can't talk, that they don't know how to talk, that they have mental issues sometimes. And so after a while, you got to step back and go, okay, let's reassess the situation and go, why am I not getting this information? And then you start to realize there's that ring where there's a lack of information. It's like the black hole. I'm like, oh, I get it. And then as soon as I did that, all of a sudden I started leaning into it, started connecting with a man. He started giving me more information. Information started flowing in. And then next thing I know, I'm going, okay, I know this man was very frustrated. And he started overshadowing me, and I'm starting to beat my head back and forth. And I go, I know, and then I started speaking in the first person, going, I often hit myself. I often, didn't like myself. I often was very frustrated and didn't know what to do. And I hurt myself. And then I kind of snap out of it, and I'm like, okay, this man hurt himself. He's telling me the word revolver. Would you understand the word revolver? At that point, she lost it. And, she knew that he hurt himself with a revolver, and she knew exactly who it was. Then he's giving me all this information. And he's like saying, and he's also showing me his young daughter, and how, guilty he felt and how horrible he felt, for the daughter and for all the people that he hurt. And how sorry he was, how much he hurt, his love. And it just became so emotional. And at the end of the reading, this woman said, you don't know how important it was to hear him come through and apologize for what he did, and to know that he's okay now, and to feel his love once again, and she goes, quote, "You're doing God's work," at which point I'm just like, I'm, tears are coming down my eyes. And I'm just like, wow, this is, and that's, again, sort of an example of why spirit comes through. They come through to heal.
Yeah, to kind of heal and help the people living move forward instead of being stuck in the energy of the past, and help the spirit move forward and as well. So those are the spirits, deceased loved ones who have crossed over on the other side and are trying to communicate some gaps that they couldn't communicate while they were living, through channeling or mediumship. What about the ones that never crossed over but are still hanging around? So whether it's somebody hanging around a house, somebody's energy that's kind of a little bit of their energy stuck in. I'll give you an example, kind of where I'm going with this. So my husband, during the pandemic, started to take up a new hobby, and that's storage wars. Now, there's actually websites where you can put in a small bid, and then if you get you will be granted the winning bid, or out of default somebody will let go of their bid, and then out of default you automatically get the storage unit that has kind of fallen to collections. And so he'll get storage units for $40, $60, and he will go through it. And it's been a good thing in that it's helping him lose weight and stay active. but he's going through it and looking through stuff, and you kind of can learn about how somebody lived their life based on their possessions that they had collected and put in storage. Well, so he's going through it thinking, oh, I'm going to find something good out of this so I can sell it. However, in the last couple months of 2020, he's getting more of these cheap storage units, large storage units, kind of falling on, do you want this, another, do you want this? So there seems to be an increase of that. However, when we go through it one at a time, my daughter, who has this ability, starts feeling the energy of the stuff. And the last one that she was going through, she was kind of like, I'm so sad. Sammy's not here. I'm here. I'm really sad. And I knew exactly what was going on because she's really empathic. So I said, one, you need to cross over. It's enough of feeling sorry for yourself. Okay, it's okay. You learned your lesson. You need to cross over. Two, my daughter needs to come back. And then, put her to bed. Next morning, she completely forgot about it. But every single storage unit that comes through has a different energy. And we can kind of feel the energy of how that person lived their life and so forth. So you have the energy of people who never crossed over and have been hanging around for whatever reason. And sometimes they hang around their possessions, like their house or their stuff or whatever. What do you do for that?
Typically what I do is I really try to avoid those people who are really caught between. I'll really focus on those individuals who have already crossed the light, into the light, because they're the ones who can really benefit those in the physical the most. It's really
they're
the
on
people.
the other side. They can see the full picture.
Yeah, they're
right?
literally looking things from a different perspective. So from that perspective, if you'll excuse the pun, I'm really focused only on individuals who have crossed into the light, who are full of light, who are, even if they've just barely crossed into the light, like this individual who had hurt himself with the revolver. He was describing what it was like over there for him. He was saying, there's so much love. I'm being bathed in so much love. It's like, it's so wonderful. And I'm learning so much. And they're saying, you've got every reason, to love yourself. And they were trying to teach him to learn to love himself. So it's always about love. And so everything that always comes through is about love. It's like the operative word. Love yourself and love, these spirits are loving, both themselves and their recipients. So that's really how I'm kind of focused as far as, whom I connect with.
Right. So you don't necessarily, I mean, I know you offer people a mediumship course, and your staff offers it both online and in person, but it's mostly mediumship that they can learn for themselves and to communicate with people who've already crossed over. So none of the ones that still linger. Right.
It's because it's really most beneficial to everybody involved who, if we try to connect with those who have already crossed over, because those who have crossed over are trying to connect with us. And we are trying to connect with them. Those who haven't fully crossed over have their own issues, have their own debates, their own concerns. And they're also quite more often than not even convinced that they've passed. So it's almost, I don't
go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
like,
go ahead, you're.
we're both like, oh, we're so hot on this topic here. Do you offer any kind of training on how to help, if you come across these ones, cross them over?
Not usually, because that's a whole nother topic into itself. Just learning about mediumship is a huge subject that could take years. I mean, it takes people years just to understand mediumship to get fairly good at it. So when you're learning mediumship, you really have to learn small pieces at a time. To try to say, let's learn everything all at once would kind of be difficult. So we try to teach people, beginners and maybe even intermediate, and we really kind of focus like a laser on what it is that's very important to improve your own abilities and to improve your own spirituality and to open yourself up and to help yourself further awaken, because the more open you are and the more spiritually awakened you've become, that much closer you are to spirit.
Right. So, the thing is that what I wonder about is, okay, so when people take the courses that your staff offers and that you teach, are they getting the same training both online as they do in person, or is there like a different curriculum for different modalities?
It's a good question. There are two different courses. The first course is very much of a basic introductory course, and that's an online course. And what that does is it's about 9 hours of instruction, 9 hours worth of videos with 113 different topics that covers as much as I humanly could cover. But it's all in like little bite-sized pieces, like several minutes long, so you can really quickly fly through it.
Okay, that's good.
The more advanced one, that one's a one-on-one course where you're focusing on those areas where you feel you would like to advance or you want some help, because you've got to know how to crawl before you can run.
Right. Well, let me ask you this really quick in terms of training. So a lot of people, will have inklings of the sixth sense. So like maybe they will hear all of a sudden a voice in their head, like, oh, you shouldn't do that. And like, where did that come from? Okay. And maybe it's not all the time, but maybe, kind of randomly. Or this is a common one. This is why I have a fan on at night when I go to sleep. But if it's completely deafening silent, you always hear either a talk show in the distance going on or big band music. Can you explain that the big band music and the talk show radio going on at night that some people pick up?
What you'll as far as the big band music, that may actually be something, and it's different for everybody. It could actually be something that is a reminder of somebody else. And what could actually be happening is that you may be picking up on somebody else's memory. Like, let's say, for example, your grandfather may be trying to come through, and you may actually be hearing something that he's trying to drop into your awareness. Like, remember, I used to like big band music, or that was what I grew up with. Because that basically will start to give you the time frame of the person that's communicating. If you're hearing that music in your mind, you're becoming aware of there's somebody coming from that time frame or something that's significant to that person in some way, shape, or form.
And what about because I have the concept that there is frequencies going on all the time, and sometimes you tune into certain frequencies just kind of randomly. But I mean, what about hearing talk radio at night?
Then you've got great hearing.
Okay. Okay. Well, what about hearing a voice in your head that's not yours? Can you? That's a common one for people.
That's a great one. What often happening is that you're actually connecting with your spirit guides. Your spirit guides are coming in and speaking with you. And more often than not, people think it's just that voice in your head, quote unquote. And more often than not, people think it's your own voice, and they're like, forget it. I'm not going to pay attention to it, because we're always talking to ourselves all the time. And when we get that little voice in our head, it's something that, because we don't pay attention to it, that's our free will saying, I'm not going to pay attention to it because I really don't care to.
Right. Right.
But that's for our own demise. I don't want to say demise, it's the wrong word. It's our own fault for not listening to it, because more often than not, there's actually great wisdom in the words or the concepts that come through. And the question I'm always getting is, well, how do you tell the difference between the words that are just in your mind and your own active imagination, your own brain talking to yourself all the time, versus a spirit guide? The best way to delineate the difference is to recognize that a concept that pops into your head, like it's a word or a phrase that's being dropped into your head out of nowhere, that has no context, no prior connection in your earlier thoughts. That's a guide coming through, because it's not like you were thinking about that thing before. Your mind may be thinking in linear terms, so your thoughts go in A, B, C, D, E, F. It's a very progression oriented linear fashion of thought. When all of a sudden you're going A, B, C, Z, what? Wait, where'd that come from? That makes absolutely no sense. Z is your spirit guide, because it's a non sequitur coming from left field. It makes no sense to what you were just thinking. Or there are times where you might be just like driving along the road, thinking, not really thinking much of yourself, and all of a sudden you hear this voice screaming at you, "Move over," or "Hit the brakes," or sometimes people get these unusual voices, and they're like, "Ah, where'd I get that? Where'd that come from?" Yeah, that's a guide.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I had a client who, every once in a while we'll get these voices in the head, and he's like, "What is going on?" He's like 6'7", and he's just like a macho guy. But anyways, he's doing the drive, and all of a sudden had this insane feeling and a female voice that said, "Go get milk," at the convenience store, which was right around the corner. And he said, "Go get milk." And so he's like, "Oh, okay, fine. I don't want this to keep going. I'll go get milk." So he went to the convenience store, bought 2 gallons of whole milk, and then got in the car. He's like, "What am I going to do with 2 gallons of milk?" And he just felt compelled to drive. He was following his gut to drive to this rundown apartment building, like a block away, a block or 2 away. And he just looked up. He's like, "What am I?" And this voice said, "Go to apartment blah blah blah." Just look. So he's looking at that one. So he's like, "Okay, well, you know what? I got to get rid of this. So I'm just gonna watch my back and make sure that I'm not getting myself into a danger here." Being 6'7", he still kind of gets a little bit nervous. So so he walks up with the milk, knocks on the door. This woman comes opens the door, and he says, "I don't know what is going on, but and this is going to be completely weird, but I just felt the feeling to get 2 gallons of milk and come and give it to you." And she just started crying because she said, "I have an infant and we ran out of milk and I have no money."
Oh, wow.
Okay. And he's like, "Whoa." Okay. He's like, "Oh, so he gave her the milk and he said, 'God bless, have a good one.'" And he's not religious at all. Doesn't belong to any. And, got in his car and went, and it doesn't happen very often, but he, called me and he said, "What is the deal?" I said, "Well, did you get rid of the voice?" And he's like, "Yes." That's all you needed to do.
Yep.
That's all you needed to do. And it just proved to you that there's a whole system that is watching over everybody, and they're all, sometimes you're in the right place, and let's call this person to do that job.
Yeah, there are also times where spirit will come in and say, "You've got to take exit 38," and you're like, "What? Take exit 38," and the voice gets louder and louder and more persistent.
Yeah, so you're like, just to shut you up, I'll take exit 38, but I will be watching to make sure I don't get myself hurt here.
and so eventually people, I forget who did this. Somebody did this, and they took exit 38, and they were listening to the news report on the radio, and apparently what happened is where that car was, there was like a massive 10-car pileup that had he not gotten off at exit 38, he would have been in that car wreck. And the entire highway was like stopped, and it was just like, you get all these kinds of stories all the time. All the time.
I mean, all the time, and you hear these stories all the time. I had another client who, she doesn't really working on her sixth sense, but wants to kind of rekindle it. But when she was younger, when she was in elementary school, her and her friend, it actually saved both of their lives, went to another friend's house, and she had the ability that she's trying to rekindle now, is the ability to see auras. But anyways, when she was a child, she had seen the aura of her friend and the family, and she just saw black in the aura, and it really scared her because she never saw black in anybody's aura. She was just really scared about it. So she made a big fuss to her other friend and said, "No, I don't want to go home." And because she made such a big fuss, her other friend said, "Fine, let's just go home. We're not going to play at so-and-so's house." And so they left. And they went home, they had dinner, they turned the TV on, and on the news, this is like 4 or so hours later at night, on the news, that house, their friend's house, for whatever reason, randomly was chosen, and everybody got murdered by a serial killer that just, for whatever reason, picked that house. So it happened that, like, literally that night. Had they been playing there, they would have also experienced that. But because she just had this intense feeling and seeing everybody's aura that she just was completely scared of and never saw in her life, but she listened to it and it saved their life. So you have a lot of these stories. And so when people are like, your sixth senses, being able to channel, being able to be a medium, being able to tap into the other side and learn to coexist with this ability, over and over again, it's proven that there's a lot of grace in all of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's the whole thing. It's all about positive energy. It's all about love. It's all about how can we learn to live with this positive high vibration that's all around us, that wants to do nothing but help us. So the more we interact with it, the better we'll all be.
Right. So I am looking forward to following your work and sending people over to your website to learn about mediumship, channeling, learn how to communicate with spirit, whether they do it for themselves or and their family or friends, or whether they decide to do it as an extracurricular, kind of a side hustle, makes it extra income, however it manifests. Now, do you have a last message for the builders of the fifth dimension, people with these higher extraordinary abilities?
I would say always think of how you can heal somebody else and how can you bring love to the rest of the world.
That's really good. Well, Chris, thank you for offering your lifetime work in mediumship and showing people all over the world how easy it is to communicate with our deceased loved ones. And for more information about Chris Lippincott's books, offerings, and courses, please visit his website, which is montclairmedium.com. And thank you kindly to our listeners for listening to another enlightening conversation. Until next time, blessings.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the 5th dimension. For more information about today's guest, please go to the show description. For more information about Vaughn's metaphysical work, please go to merkabachakras.com. The views expressed today are for entertainment purposes and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or replace any medical or legal advice. Don't forget to subscribe for more interviews about the 5th dimension. Until we meet again, blessings.